This story begins with the main character being revived before his college entrance exams. It happened in the Jia Kingdom and Chen High School, in a class where third-year students studied. The guy grabbed his head and screamed, because if he was destined to be reborn, then why not at least after entering college? Since ancient times, people on the blue planet have suffered from disasters and invasions of secret kingdoms. The secret kingdoms united with other worlds inhabited by terrible monsters, and at times they used rifts to invade the human world. Powerful monsters capable of destroying entire nations have become a threat to all humanity. Humans have developed a system of monster genes that, when entered, can awaken the monster within and unlock natural talents. Only such warriors could save humanity, and because of this they received a higher status and honor, unattainable for ordinary people. The blue planet has entered an era where fighting power has become everything. Everything else is secondary. Power is above all. The others looked at the main character, deciding that he was having a nightmare again, and began to make fun of him. One of the girls asked him why he didn't quit school and go home and become a laborer and toil until he died. In every story about the protagonist's persecution, there is always a main witch, and now she was right in front of him. Apparently, the original owner didn't have the best reputation. His parents were in an accident, which is why he stopped studying and training. Then the guy realized that the previous owner of this body had not studied, and now he had to suffer. Suddenly, the teacher announced that they would soon begin administering the genetic modification serum. Their 3 years of strengthening their bodies and training their fighting energy were done for today. Then the man looked sternly at the main character, who only smiled innocently, because in fact he was not guilty of anything. But still, since he ended up in this boy's body, he had to bring order to his life. After a while, they headed to the gene injection room, where the students discussed among themselves who they would wake up as. This is a serum for awakening genes. It contains the primary genes of all magical monsters ever recorded by warriors, humans. After the injection, one gene will be awakened at random. Usually the stronger they are physically, the stronger the awakened gene. The teacher asked everyone not to be nervous, and those whose names he called should be suitable for receiving the serum. After the injection, many students began to glow and writhe in pain. The main character didn't think twice before stabbing himself in the neck with the syringe. After a few seconds, the teacher noticed with surprise that nothing had changed for him, deciding that the serum was wrong. Suddenly, that same witch said with a grin that nothing had awakened in Heya at all. An unawakened warrior is like a bird without wings. So the girl decided that the guy was simply doomed. At that very moment, the boy felt something, receiving the gene of an infinite monster whose overall physique was equal to S rank. The girl grimaced, asking him not to pretend, but he suddenly asked everyone to get out of there. His eyes lit up as he menacingly declared that if they didn't leave, it would be too late. At that very moment, he roared loudly, emitting incredible energy that pushed the girl away. The other students were also knocked down, feeling a powerful aura around them. The student who commanded ice could hardly believe that someone stronger than him had appeared. He received an A rank, the crazy flame of Dimmel and several abilities. Looking at his hand, the guy guessed that he had hit the jackpot with this system. The others couldn't believe that such a loser had received such abilities, and he used his aura to scatter everyone nearby. Even though Wang Sik was unconscious, she awakened a second-level D-rank magical monster, a scorpion with fire claws. Suddenly, a loudspeaker announced that the awakened students must go to the educational building for a gene test, a device for detecting awakened genes. It can check the gene magic monster and its martial arts level. A Jing from their class awakened a bloodline third-tier magical beast, the swift vertebrate beetle. Zhou deserves the title of the best student in the class. He has a 9th level of martial arts, and he has also awakened a 3rd-level supreme bloodline. Lu, a 9th level martial artist, awakened a rare 4th-level bloodline. Their awakened monster genes are classified as level 3 or level 4, with Ji being A rank. While the guy was thinking about this, he was called in for an inspection, which caused him to zone out a little. Suddenly, he noticed that everyone was looking at him with burning eyes. This world really does revolve around power. He headed towards the device while the other students were sure that its level must be high. They wondered what kind of bloodline could have such strong pressure after awakening. Everyone froze in surprise when they began to read that he was a level 3 martial artist. But the monster's lineage was unknown. Some immediately started laughing, because even the younger brother of one of the students could beat him up. He realized that this gene could not be identified, but a clue about the infinite monster gene appeared. By completing quests or increasing his reputation, the guy can also get additional monster genes. He realized that as long as he completed quests, he could increase the infinite monster gene, becoming like the king of monsters. A little later, the teacher was surprised that he wanted to switch to homeschooling, because he doubted that he would really study at home. The guy assured that he wanted to get better. He was too far behind, so now he needed to go through special training. But if he wants to become a warrior, the only way is to go to college, but right now his foundation is too weak. The teacher may not understand, but he has awakened a powerful bloodline, and he definitely has a chance of succeeding if he trains hard. The man agreed with disbelief, knowing that he would still return to him to take the program again the following year. He's parents' house was mortgaged for $600,000, and with the accident compensation of over $1 million, he has a decent starting capital. According to the infinite monster gene data, each gene awakens with 1% compatibility, but Dimala has exactly 3%. There is only one answer. Dimala's gene absorbed the power of the genetic awakening serum and received an additional 2% compatibility. This proves that gene-related serums in this world can enhance the abilities of genes, so it is necessary to buy a gene-enhancing serum. But when he got there, he noticed that everyone around had awakened bloodlines. After awakening, he gained a unique sensory ability and can now sense life signals. Unfortunately, he is only a newbie now and can only hold back the bloodline for now. But it is worth waiting until his strength increases. A crazy smile appeared on his face as he imagined the results he could achieve in the future. While he was thinking about this, someone suddenly came up behind him and put a hand on his shoulder. It was a pretty girl who suggested not to stare at others like that. The guy said he came here to buy gene drugs, but his interlocutor was surprised that he was already using them at this stage. Gene drugs are expensive and can easily cause resistance, making the drug less effective over time. To get the maximum effect, warriors usually wait until their bloodline reaches a dead end before using them. Moreover, a hard-type beginner potion costs around $400,000, which is something he couldn't afford right now. Then the girl suggested that he take her business card. With her recommendation, he could get some kind of discount on veterans. The guy thanked her with a smile and said goodbye, and the girl decided that they would meet again someday. The guy then decided to move forward with his plan, but only huge expenses awaited him along the way. Later in the evening, when he was home, he began to inject himself with serums, feeling the level rise. In just a few minutes, he achieved what others had worked for 3 years to achieve, and that was just using his basic characteristics. Perhaps he really does have a chance to pass the exams with the highest score. But if the cheat mod can't defeat geniuses, then what kind of cheat is it anyway? He then decided to go to a secret dimension. S-class beasts are completely out of human control, and if they break out into the world, it will be an apocalypse. He decided to start with the E-class dimension. There were fewer people here than he expected, and only a few weak beasts remained here. Upon arrival, he was asked to sign a warning about the possibility of death. He then walked up to the portal, looking at the rift of the secret dimension in surprise. Although he had seen what the secret dimensions looked like in textbooks, it was nothing compared to seeing them in person. While he was looking at the starry sky, a first-rank beast, a saber-toothed rabbit, crept up behind him. He reacted instantly and grabbed him by the head when he decided to attack him from behind. He only needed to squeeze his hand to destroy the monster, obtaining a magic core worth 1,000 yuan. But he earned this 1,000 within a minute of entering. It is very effective. The average person only gets 3,000 or 4,000 in a month. But collecting too many first-rank beast cores is pointless. It would be better to find at least second-rank beast cores. As if reading his thoughts, a huge worm, which was a second-rank beast, crawled out of the ground. It was enough for Hai to swing his sword once to inflict a deep wound on the monster. He read the monster encyclopedia, and compared to the table-like shell on his back, it was obviously much easier to penetrate the soft armor on his stomach. Suddenly, the snake rolled towards him, but the guy used martial arts, throwing it away from himself. At that very second, the monster opened its mouth, from which projectiles began to fly out at high speed. He reacted incredibly quickly and was able to successfully dodge. At his current level, he can't do anything against this bug, and he can barely use 50% of his strength right now. Then he decided to cheat by using the activation of the Emperor Demon's bloodline. His hands turned into clawed paws, and he then rushed straight at the monster, piercing it through and through. With his overall constitution score of 21, he completely destroyed a second-level demonic corpse eater. The short sword he had just bought was rusted from the poison, even though the blade cost 250,000. He didn't expect the energy consumption from his first monster hunt to be so high, since he didn't even bring any food with him. He discovered that the demonic corpse eater's magic core was green and even seemed to emit an alluring aroma. He decided to ignore the risks and swallowed it, waiting for the effect to take effect. At that very second, his body began to glow, and his compatibility increased from 7 to 7.5%. The guy spent hundreds of thousands on a gene potion, and it only increased his compatibility by 1%. So he decided to turn his disappointment into motivation, and tonight he would hunt as much as his heart desired. Having activated the magnetic field of life, he began to search for the nearest victim. The next day, after reaching 9% compatibility, further consumption of white nuclei no longer increased it. After the hunt, he decided to hand over 20 white magic cores and 1 green one, which surprised the girl. According to the government decree, warriors are required to hand over 1/10 of their loot. For 1 green core, she must give up 5 white ones. 9 days before the college entrance exam, he decided to visit the D-class secret dimension. During the last expedition, Captain Lin and his crew found the specific location of the blood jade flower. But because Old Man Chen was injured, he couldn't join them this time, even though the D-class dimension requires at least 6 people. The man asked his comrades not to worry, as he had contacted an agency to connect them with a new warrior. Since he is still a high school student, he had to use an underground agency to create a fake identity. He used a fake name because he had no choice. Otherwise, it would have violated copyright. With his strength as a 9th-level novice warrior, he is not suited for this dimension. But the team is willing to let him observe and learn. Explaining his duties before the mission was the right decision, perhaps better than setting him up in the middle of the mission. When they entered the dimension, the tracker showed that the blood jade flower was in the oasis ahead. Last time there was a tropical forest. Now there is a desert. It seems that the secret dimensions are connected to more than one world. Suddenly they discovered that the car was being followed by Earth demon rats. The captain ordered Hood to take care of them, and immediately threw several throwing knives, hitting their target precisely. When infusing combat energy into a throwing knife, it explodes like a bomb on impact. And this guy was ruthless and laconic. Having reached a certain place, the team decided to go on foot, which surprised he. As it turns out, the monsters in the oasis are highly sensitive to the sound of a running engine, which would certainly alert them. Now the team had to throw a flashbang grenade to lure the beast out, set traps, and suppress enemy fire. Having given the instructions, the captain turned to the newcomer, asking him to simply watch and not interfere. The flashbang grenade contains the pheromones of a high-level monster, which attracts animals and makes them think that their territory is being invaded. The newcomer was immediately warned to be careful, as a 2nd-level monster was already approaching. However, besides the monster, there was a man standing nearby who licked the blade of a knife with a mad smile. The whole team worked together harmoniously, and due to the short time frame, they were able to cut off the monster's head. When the Earth Dragon was defeated, the captain suggested moving forward. But suddenly someone warned him, and the man turned around, noticing a huge paw above him. Without wasting any time, he soared into the air and used his skill to finish off the monster. The captain couldn't believe it. The guy was just a newbie, and yet he had enough strength to take down a 2nd-rank beast. Everyone immediately started praising the guy, not believing that he had killed a 2nd-class magical beast. They were then informed that the Earth Dragon had been defeated, providing proof. This time they also collected the essence of the Earth Dragon's soul. This thing can significantly improve the gene. This time they were on the brink of death, but they managed to defeat the dragon with their combined efforts. However, the man was not allowed to finish speaking, and a knife was thrust into his back, with the suggestion not to think about it now. It was Hood who immediately pulled away from the captain, landing next to the unfamiliar man. Huo, who looked several times larger than an ordinary person, appeared in front of them. He steals loot from warriors that they find in the dimensions, and now he has set his sights on them. Hood's blade was poisoned, but it was unclear how he knew about this place, since they only learned about the flower's location after entering the dungeon. At that very moment, he realized that the boy had sealed the information into the dart when he attacked the foxes. Hood suggested that the boy go back to school because the entrance exams were just around the corner, and instead he was playing with death. He confirmed that he would be the best, and his opponent threw a knife at him and called him an upstart. The guy caught the knife with 2 fingers right in front of his face, concluding that the insolent scum yapping in front of him was the real upstart. Huo decided that this was an interesting guy and now he wanted his head. Hood accepted the order and then threw several of his knives at He. It was enough for the guy to release energy for all the knives to shatter against his protective field. The team members noticed that Hood was missing and then warned that he was above the guy. He decided this was the perfect chance to try out his new skill, so he created a beam that pierced the opponent's chest. The captain couldn't believe that he had taken out Huo with one blow, and Huo immediately began asking what great family he came from. The boy stated that he was from the Dimala clan, after which he asked if the man planned to beg for mercy. Huo was confident that even with the gene technique, he would not be able to close this huge gap in fighting skills. The man grew even larger in size, after which he rushed to attack, but the guy managed to wound his leg and then jumped up, dodging the blow. Second-tier warriors are truly something else. His disgusting breath couldn't even melt the bone in his ankle. Huo clasped his hands and was sure that he could deal with the insolent man, but he was already behind him. With incredibly fast movements, he began to strike the huge man in the back. In just a couple of moments, he shrank in size and fell to the ground unconscious. Huo didn't expect that he had a gene technique that released toxic gas, and he would definitely be punished for it. He noticed that the number of people cursing him was growing, without understanding who this man even was. Sometime later, the annual entrance ceremony of the General Martial Arts School was held at the Central Sports Stadium. The entrance exam is competitive, with candidates competing in pairs and the winners advancing to the next round. The exam lasts 3 days, 2 of which are qualifying competitions, where students will compete until the best participant is chosen. Fighters carry the future of humanity on their shoulders, so they must show their true potential for themselves and for all humanity. After this, battles began in several arenas at once, but in the 6th arena, one candidate had not yet arrived. They checked the 6th arena participants, spotting only Sick. If he didn't appear soon, he would be counted a failure. The girl decided that being made a fool of at the genetics conference was the greatest shame of her life, and now she wanted to humiliate He again. The audience decided that the guy was simply a coward, since he didn't bother to show up for the entrance exam. The referee had already blown the whistle, declaring that time was up and he had not shown up for the exam. Like a friend, the spectators felt a huge aura approaching, which immediately collapsed onto the arena. While Sick was trying to comprehend what the hell was going on, someone's foot suddenly appeared in front of her face. It was He who rushed towards her at full speed, incapacitating her with one blow. Just a little more, and he would have had to return next year. But it seems he made it in time and won. At that very moment, the spectators began to shout with delight that this guy had defeated his opponent with just one punch. Captain Lin gave him a bloody jade flower as a token of gratitude, but it took some time for it to improve his physical abilities. In his next fight, the boy went up against Long Dao from middle school number 4, defeating him easily. He defeated all other opponents with incredible ease and speed. The spectators literally roared with delight, not believing that the guy ended every battle with the very first blow. He ended up winning all 3 matches and moving on to the final round, after which he was surrounded by people offering him different universities. Many people offered him generous grants and scholarships just to get the guy to pay attention to them. Suddenly, he apologized with a smile and announced that he wanted to enter Huadu University. This upset many people, and they were sure that after reaching the finals, he would come to them for help when he suffered his first defeat. In a second-class city like theirs, only a select few are able to enter this holy land. Suddenly, 2 men in suits approached him, offering to collaborate, deciding to redefine his level of martial arts right then and there. They were shocked to notice that he was already level 9, although half a month ago he was level 3, and they also noticed that he had been going to secret dimensions. He explained that he went there to find himself because before his death, his father left him a bequest asking him to surpass human strength. But when he added that he had broken through his own genetic barrier, shock immediately appeared on the men's faces. The guy himself didn't understand how he became the object of surveillance after the strangers quickly ran away to report it to someone. He observed how relatives supported different students online. Live broadcasts of interviews with parents and friends of candidates were now being conducted. But he has no one who could support him. He is truly an orphan whom no one cares about. Sometime later, the first match of the promotion round began, and he was already standing in the arena. In front of him was Luo. He had surpassed all the students from the 3rd school, as he was an 8th level warrior. He suggested that he strike first, which angered his opponent, who already knew the outcome of the fight. Without wasting any time, Luo released his energy, wanting to destroy the arrogant guy as quickly as possible. But as soon as his clawed paw approached He's face, he immediately grabbed it tightly and squeezed, praising Luo's inertia. The boy fell to his knees from the unbearable pain, but at that very second, he used his skill to strike him in the back. When the judge announced his victory, the guy was a little upset that there were no worthy opponents for him. It was another instant defeat. Although Luo initially looked so strong, for some reason he immediately ended up on the ground. Many believed that he, calm as a cloud even as the wind, was the sign of a true master, and his skills were on a completely different level. Although he used his hands this time, it was still a deadly blow that thrilled every spectator. As the unconscious boy was being carried away on a stretcher, another student, watching him, called out the name of the man who had defeated him. Meanwhile, in the live broadcast room and the admissions office, the staff were given 30 minutes to gather all the information about he. Meanwhile, in the second arena, the qualifying competitions were in full swing in the second group. It was a battle between the Wonder Beauties Kai and Lu, where the former could not stand the robotic expression on her opponent's face. At that moment, a girl in a white kimono stood opposite her, the unattainable flower of the high school number 1. The male half of the spectators were extremely pleased because there is nothing better than watching a fight between beauties. When the fight began, Liu rushed forward, determined to see how well her opponent could control herself. Tsai reacted instantly, using her skills to counter each attack. The blonde asked her to be more serious, gradually accelerating and trying to hit her in the stomach. Liu's hand was caught in the swirling air currents that had been created, and she couldn't get free. The commentator shouted that with Liu's level of fighting talent, she didn't even need exams to prove herself. As it turned out, she had mastered the Xuanhuang martial skill, making her a candidate for admission to Huadu College. This girl actually awakened the third-level royal bloodline, the Shadow Claw of the Tiger King. Royal bloodlines are notoriously difficult to control, let alone a ferocious shadow tiger. Tsai then attacked again, declaring that anyone below the level of a martial artist could not challenge her. They then began to exchange many blows without causing any noticeable injury to each other. The fighting energies of Sei and Liu collided with enormous force from the impact, and a cloud of dust filled the arena. When the cloud of dust cleared, spectators noticed that Liu was the only one still standing. But after a couple of seconds, she collapsed to the ground unconscious, and next to her, Tsai was still standing in the arena. Using only martial techniques, she completely defeated her opponent and awakened the royal bloodline within herself. After these matches, the draw for the top 8 participants in the tournament began. He stuck his hand into the sphere to find out which group he would belong to. A huge guy named Guan, who was also in Group A, appeared next to him, and they would most likely meet face to face. They would be second, so the smiling guy suggested watching the first battle. Luo is strong. He stayed back a year, specially preparing to enter Huadu University. Guan was sure that his opponent didn't have a single chance, and he didn't even know that he studied at his school. The guy wondered how this Luo would compare to Guan, who looked indestructible. He explained that he was the president of the martial arts club, and his 2 teammates combined could not defeat him. And during this year's exams, he thinks that he is the only real threat, because he immediately sensed the enormous power in him. A few minutes later, the second fight began, and the 2 guys entered the arena, standing in front of each other. They looked into each other's eyes with a smile, thereby trying to crush their opponent with their calmness. A moment later, the battle was already in full swing, with the 2 students exchanging incredible blows. Even the spectators didn't expect anything like this, as the shock waves reached them, forcing them to cover their eyes. Guan remarked that it was indeed mysterious to be able to destroy cells, even though he himself had created a barrier that protected against nuclear radiation. It was an amazing martial art, and the guy in front of him was a real monster not to be trifled with. Guan decided to show him the martial arts that had been passed down from generation to generation in their family. The guy released a huge snake from his hands, which surprised he, as he did not expect such speed. Commentators were shocked as he, previously known as a one-punch man, was hit for the first time. Blood gushed from his mouth and he was thrown back several meters, but still standing on his feet. Guan got into the swing of things and was confident that his opponent would not be able to escape his decisive attack. This attack wasn't just physical. He integrated fighting energy into his body, dealing double damage. All his opponents before him were underachievers. They had no experience fighting a strong opponent. Guan can not only spit martial energy into his body, but also block it, and as a result, he cannot use martial arts. After the explanation, the huge guy began to beat his opponent, hoping to emerge victorious. He used various techniques from his family, confident that Hai would not defeat him. commentators were sure that Guan's series of techniques left he no chance to parry. The medical staff outside were already preparing to go inside, as this combination of blows would have killed even an ordinary martial artist. But suddenly Guan felt a huge aura behind him and turned around in horror. A completely different he appeared before him, claiming that he was the first person to see him in this form. If high school students can demonstrate the manifestation of a magical beast, they will certainly be able to enter university without entrance exams. This is the embodiment of a magical beast, and no one expected that in this small place. Besides Kai, there would also be a genius of the bloodline. Guan visibly tensed up because the awakening of his family was at such an extreme level. Each examiner will be equipped with headphones to monitor candidates and a range of factors inside and outside the examination rooms. After seeing he transform into a magical beast, the examiners discovered the problem and enveloped the arena in combat energy to prevent nuclear radiation. People immediately began to wonder if anyone knew the lineage of the magical beast that the boy had awakened. It seems like the blue stars don't have creatures like Dimala, so it's no wonder they didn't know about him. Guan's nose started bleeding again, and his martial arts shield can no longer block this guy's energy. He then decided to unleash another third-order royal bloodline and put it all on the line. He needed to deal with He quickly before his powers finally wore off. Looking at the approaching opponent, the guy extended his hand forward, creating a beam of energy. If Guan hadn't released his power in time, his entire arm would have been shattered. He made so much noise, and now he's actually getting hit in the face. As a friend, he noticed that he was slowly approaching him, praising him along the way, but this could not change the situation. The second battle of the top 8 in the entrance exam revealed the royal bloodline of the third level. After he awakened, his strength became simply incomprehensible. Guan was no longer able to suppress his fighting energy. He can only retreat in order to succeed, but the guy asked the big guy not to get distracted. Guan couldn't move him as expected, but his goal was to move behind him. He rose into the air with his skill and decided to stomp his opponent into the ground. But he stood there as if nothing had happened. Now it was his turn to attack. But as soon as he approached, his opponent immediately fell to his knees. Guan bowed his head before him, declaring to his older brother that he surrendered, which surprised the boy quite a bit. He was shocked because he had prepared himself for his blow, but he just gave in and now he feels awkward. Holding back his energy made him feel too strange, but he couldn't do anything about it. He shed his monstrous form, realizing that if one side surrendered, the other had no right to attack. When the competition was announced to be over, the spectators immediately began to shout in delight, praising He. After the fight, there was a heated discussion about this fight, where many were disappointed with Guan. Fan groups of He began to form, and videos of his battles were all over social media. Many groups were already full, and more new people were joining the discussions. Director Guan was irritated and disappointed, as he had pinned all his hopes on his victory. They spent a lot of money on his education, and until he pays off the debt, he may not even think about going to college. Guan put his hand on his shoulder, saying that he would not have been able to bear this blow if he had not admitted defeat, and it was unlikely that the director would have taken the blow for him. As for the kindness their school showed him, he will gradually repay it in the future. After a fierce competition, the top 4 students in the college entrance exams were determined. Principals of other schools praised their students who made it to the final 4. The draw for the semifinals began, with He again placed in the first group. Suddenly, Tsai approached him, calmly informing him that she was also in the first group. The first match of the entrance exam semifinals is an internal battle for the title of the best of An Chen First Middle School, He versus Kai. Many believed that the goddess had a better chance of winning, but it is now known that she has mastered 2 mysterious martial arts. Although he was forced to awaken his bloodline, he cannot compare to the goddess Kai. After heated discussions, spectators gathered around the arena waiting for the participants to appear. A few minutes later, He and Tsai came to the center, and the judge stood between them, announcing the students. As soon as he gave the signal to start the fight, the boy also released his power, creating a cloud of dust around him. Kai closed her eyes, watching him carefully, hoping that he was strong enough. Just as the fight began, he suddenly released a large amount of steam that engulfed the entire arena. The commentator was shouting loudly, eager to see how Tsai would handle this year's dark horse. The girl's martial arts skills are far superior to those of a guy with her magical skills. He won't be able to harm her. Such a martial arts genius has a very high combat intelligence. The longer the fight lasts, the more disadvantageous it will be for him. You need to go all out from the start and attack with all your available arsenal. Tsai decided to use martial arts to defend herself and counterattack. However, the guy tricked her and swung his leg, managing to deliver an unexpected blow. All this time he was shouting that he would use his fists, but eventually he used a steel whip which forced Kai to retreat. However, no matter how hard she tried to move away, the guy very quickly closed the distance, wanting to strike. She used her fighting energy to push he away and was now able to break free from his grip. However, the guy was sure that she would not leave him so easily and filled his claws with fighting energy. None of her tricks worked as he gradually closed the distance. He then began to land a series of powerful punches that Tsai had to defend against. She didn't understand how he wasn't tired of these intense attacks, even though she had mastered the Kai family's defensive secret art. The other one, the Jade Finger, is more offensive. If she could use one of these techniques, who would be able to escape from the onslaught? However, he doesn't give her a single chance. She won't be able to hold out for long, otherwise she'll fall off the court and lose. Tsai realized that she had no choice but to use her last trump card. She transformed into something resembling a bird and immediately flew into the air. This awakening of the Kai clan first revealed her lineage as a magical beast, an unearthly bird. She asked the guy to be careful, because in this form she cannot control her power. He thanked her because he had only been using 50% of his power until now. Tsai immediately disappeared from his field of vision, but the guy quickly felt that she was behind him. When their fists collided, a shockwave was created that made the spectators unable to even open their eyes. The girl noticed with surprise that he had also transformed into a monster. Kai felt that her opponent's energy fluctuations would not lead to anything good. The commentator also noted that the magical form of the beast Hai is gaining strength. The protruding spine on his back was accumulating enormous energy, and it was gradually flowing into He's mouth. At that very second, he emitted a beam of energy straight towards the girl. She immediately put her wings out in front of her like a shield, hoping to protect herself in this way. He's breath was reflected by the feathers on Kai's body, but the energy particles flew towards the audience. People were immediately frightened, but they were protected by a barrier that was installed specifically for such an event. This barrier was created by the mayor of the city, Wan, who decided to personally show himself to the spectators. He asked everyone to watch closely, because today the strongest champion in the history of their city would emerge. The commentator shouted joyfully that the mayor had protected the viewers using his special skill. However, although Tsai was able to defend herself, her feathers had already fallen off, and she herself looked barely able to stand on her feet. He had indeed broken through her feather defense with just one blow, and now she doubted she could defeat him. And from childhood they said that she was the hope for the revival of the family, and therefore could not lose. Her mother made every effort to educate her so that one day she would revive their lineage. Tsai must not only win this exam, but continue to win in the future. She suddenly realized that she was very tired and her classmate He looked too strong. When faced with such a strong opponent, it would be perfectly acceptable to lose. The girl returned to the attack again, deciding that he should be able to use her fatigue and defeat her faster. She was able to approach him without any problems and strike him straight in the chest. But the guy didn't even move. Tsai didn't understand why he didn't dodge, while the boy asked where her fighting spirit had gone. Then he asked to look him in the eyes, because he was going to win this title fairly and honestly. The girl put her hands in front of her at the same second as the guy's fist landed in that spot. He threw her to the ground and began to beat her, repeating to her that she should be more serious. Tsai didn't understand anything, because she clearly wanted to give the victory to him, but for some reason he continued to fight. Suddenly she released an incredible amount of energy, which made He noticeably happy. This was the true form of the magical beast, and now she was ready to defeat him in her strongest form. Now a completely different girl towered over him, looking stronger and more powerful. He was glad that she had finally revealed the true form of her magical beast, and now things were taking an interesting turn. In that case, he cannot underestimate her, and therefore he himself turned into a monster. This is a physical Qi skill that combines the Dimol form and enhanced Qigong, and it is called Nuclear Light Combat Body. When they decided to have a real battle, Tsai attacked first, creating a huge tornado. When the boy broke through the skill, the girl screamed like a banshee, creating a sound wave. At first it seemed to work, but he wasn't about to fall for the same trick again. Tsai decided to give up her defense and reveal her family's most powerful technique. At the same time, the guy again accumulated his energy, after which he released it through his breath. The girl decided not to waste time and used the ability of the bloodline, after which two huge beams collided. Atomic breath and unearthly bloody spikes formed two powerful blows. Such a clash of forces is beyond the strength of these two fighters. Juan knew things were getting serious, so he used his technique to put up huge barriers. The mayor was able to contain the impact of the impact. If he had not taken action, spectators could have been injured. He put up the triple ley line wall too hastily, and it is not as strong as usual. The attack pitted he and Sai against each other, making it hard to believe there will be two incredibly strong candidates this year. Suddenly, the girl fell to one knee, realizing that the power of the magical beast's true body was exhausted, but she could not give up. Suddenly, he approached her, and her blows clearly hit him, but he still remained unharmed. The guy warned her that if she didn't get rid of the radiation in her body, she would become a cripple in the future. Tears came to her eyes as she asked why he was so insistent on making her fight when she didn't even want to fight him. He then asked in response whether she really did not want to fight him or was simply rebelling and not wanting to admit her competitive spirit. Kai was thinking about how to defeat him. That's why she gave up her defense and used all her strength. She hates fighting and wanted to lose to him as quickly as possible, but during the fight she really experienced this feeling. The girl felt the Eastern retreat not for anyone, but only for herself, when suddenly the guy said that she had too many distracting thoughts. That's why she lost. And Sai felt like the radiation had disappeared and the wounds on her hands had healed thanks to the guy. But she is still the strongest opponent he has ever faced. Next time the opportunity arises, he really wants to give her the fairest fight. When the smoke cleared, he appeared, still standing on the field, and the first duel was over. The climax of the Uncheng College entrance exams is approaching, the battle for the title of the best. Two incredibly strong students were soon to fight. He, from First Middle School, will face Joe, also from First Middle School. The opponent immediately grabbed his sword and asked the guy to get ready. After that, he rushed into the attack using one of his skills, which he met quite calmly. He was too lazy to look for Joe's real body, so he used simple brute force techniques to attack all the clones. Even with his defensive ability, he can't fight head-on, and there's hardly anyone of the same age who can fight him hand-to-hand. And since he can't fight him in close combat, he will wear him down from a distance. Zhu awakened his bloodline ability, partially modifying his body. When he created an iceberg out of thin air, the audience was convinced that with such abilities he was simply the reincarnation of an ice dragon. The force of the ice pulse was so great that an iceberg formed on the field, and he was frozen in it. However, the sudden burst of such a powerful ice force caused considerable damage to Joe's body. Suddenly, everyone held their breath and noticed that the iceberg was starting to melt. After breaking free with ease, he noticed that the ice dragon's power had no effect on him. The opponent then asked him to take the final blow. This move was the limit of his martial arts, and he had originally intended to save it for Kai. Raising his hand, Joe released a massive amount of energy, creating an ice sword. Juan couldn't believe that he already had such power at such a young age. The guy tried to attack but could only leave a scratch on He's arm, after which he noted that he would have a chance when he got a better sword in the future. Zhou doubted it, but his opponent clarified that the chance would be slightly higher than the chance of becoming a successful simpleton. The ice guy raised his hand and gave up, and the winner of the entrance exam finals turned out to be he. The viewers who watched him online screamed with joy because they were right about him. There's been some discussion online that this dark horse really was a mystery until the very end. Posters with his face appeared all over the city, even though many had heard that he was at the bottom of his class last year. The spectators watching him from the stands loudly repeated his name. After 3 days of bloody battles, the winner was finally determined, the best student in the city, and Chen. They decided to interview him, saying that his strength was the result of catching up and accumulating strength over time. However, the boy wanted to thank his teacher. It was he who did not abandon him in trouble and encouraged him when he was at the very bottom. Meanwhile, the man who was watching him on TV began to cry because he did not deserve his praise. The guy wanted to say something else when his friend noticed the director of his school waving his arms. He asked to promote them to high school, and then he was ready to reward him with a scholarship of 2 million. He then stated that he would like to thank their school and its principal, because without their wise leadership, he would not be here. He also wanted to express gratitude to himself. Without his personal hard work and wisdom, he would not be as successful as he is now. Suddenly, the boy noticed that the system congratulated the owner of the best student title, promising to reward him with a random ability. A little later, in the stadium corridor, he was caught by journalists who bombarded him with countless questions. They were curious whether he had encountered any difficulties in winning first place, and whether he was planning to enter Hwadu University. One of the journalists caught up with him, asking who was more handsome, Psy or Liu. However, he said he did not have time to talk to reporters and quickly ran away. When I got to the basketball court, I couldn't believe the new opportunities I had received through the reward system. Suddenly, someone congratulated him on his victory, and he thought it was some reporter again. The man immediately explained that he was not a journalist, and had come from Hwadu to discuss the issue of genetic blocking. He thought that he hadn't opened any genetic locks. All his abilities were obtained through the monster's blood. He doubted that this man knew about his abilities, and did not understand who he was at all. The boy heard the term genetic block from his father, according to his recollections. However, he always wondered where his father, an ordinary taxi driver, knew this term, which was completely inappropriate for his profession. However, due to his special position, Hwadu can reveal a secret document to him. It spoke of a research institute that was once a giant in the field of genetic research. Therefore, many of its leading scientists were forced to conceal their identities and go into hiding. He decided that his father was a senior researcher at Prometheus, and that he was the result of his secret research. The man assured them that they would not make his life difficult, and came here to report this. Since the boy is a key prospect in the country's education, they will always take care of his safety. He smiled, because when a person becomes famous, he attracts more attention to himself and brings a lot of problems upon himself. When the man left, the boy was glad that at the entrance exams, he not only got a ticket to the university, but he also received a stipend of 2 million from the director, as well as an additional bonus of 800,000. The best part was that he could now choose a new ability and he couldn't wait any longer. First, a mysterious card appeared in front of him, from which an incredibly huge monster emerged. It was a D-rank gene specimen, a supergiant humanoid, and its bloodline ability was gigantization up to 60 meters. It was also possible to combine abilities. If you superimpose this Dimola gene, the result could be something incredible. Looking at this monster, the boy realized that he could become a real king of the monsters. At this time, sitting in his office, Huo asked to cancel all immediate plans. He was very annoyed because his staff could not find his brother's body in the secret kingdom. However, he was informed that traces had been found in the place where his signal had last appeared. After testing, it was found that there was a small amount of nuclear radiation. The man asked his younger brother not to get involved in the affairs of society, although his mother told him to take care of him before leaving. He realized whose handiwork it was, and concluded that the university would not be able to see his admission. The next day, when he was at home, he suddenly received a package. He was going to go to the secret dimensions to test the new gene, but someone decided otherwise. The letter said that a new secret dimension would open today at 15 o'clock, and he was invited to join forces. He couldn't understand what century his brother lived in, that he still wrote letters. When the time came, countless people came to the Redwood Mountain. They all discussed how the new secret dimension was proving to be very popular. He, who had just approached, had already noticed this. Zhou declared that he had become stronger. The guy didn't expect that Zhou had such a keen sense of smell, because he really did buy several gene preparations and increased gene compatibility. He then decided to ask which university he was going to attend, but Zhou was determined to attend Hwadu. At that very moment, people noticed that the secret dimension was opening and monsters began to emerge from it. One of the warriors ordered the brothers to destroy these monsters and fight their way inside. At that very moment, a huge crowd of people rushed at the monsters, releasing their energy. The monster itself was frightened and wanted to retreat, but discovered that it was stuck in the portal. However, the warriors had no idea about this and easily dealt with the monster. As he made his way inside, he smelled a strong scent of blood, which gave him an obvious idea. It was an ambush. The monsters seemed to have been waiting for them here for a long time. All warriors, in accordance with national laws, must prioritize killing monsters. Zhou fought the most fiercely, using his bloodline skills. When they finished, they realized that none of the monsters in this dimension were worth their efforts. Zhou was shocked when he noticed how many monsters he had killed while he had only dealt with a few. It looks like the monsters he killed simply melted. He must have used powerful nuclear radiation. It is difficult to resist. It is silent. And the most terrible thing is that radiation directly attacks the cells of living beings. The others couldn't believe how quickly he covered the area behind them, deciding that there were high-level warriors among them. But when they noticed all questions disappeared, because this one high school student could defeat 10 of them. After that, they lined up around the guy, deciding to change strategy and drive the monsters to the winner. A signal was given from the front. The leader was defeated by the onslaught of monsters, so they won, and the monsters began to retreat. At least they held out against the first wave of creatures. Initially, there were 1,000 warriors. Now there are only about 800 left. Zhou froze in shock when he noticed he carrying 2 huge bags of nuclear monsters behind him. Then the boy handed him his storage ring so that he could put everything he had saved in there. This ring is worth tens of millions, and he didn't know that Zhou the rich man, as a friend, announced to them that the boss and his friends had returned. Luckily, he can kill Lord-level monsters, otherwise they would have died of exhaustion in the herd of monsters sooner or later. Suddenly, the man turned to He, recognizing the one who had won first place in the entrance exam. He had just heard from the group members about his heroic performance and wanted to invite him to join his group. The others were pleasantly shocked, because without the support of a martial arts group, lone warriors would not be able to maintain their careers. Suddenly, a girl approached them and was surprised why Sen had rushed there so quickly. She then also invited He to join their group, guaranteeing that he could manage 15% of the group's training resources. Those watching them could not believe what they heard, because it was equivalent to a full-fledged bet. However, He stated that, unfortunately, he has no thoughts about joining a martial arts group at this time. Then they decided to just be friends this time, and in the future he could contact them at any time. Having repelled the onslaught of the monster, they cannot begin free exploration. So Zhou suggested climbing to the tops of the trees. They needed to survey the entire area and make a plan, after which they suddenly took off into the air. Once at the top, they were surprised to notice a huge creature that was more than 1,000 meters tall. They are still young, and in the next few years they will be able to defeat these monsters and even learn the truth about them. As expected, Zhou would have been scared when faced with an unknown powerful being, but he confidently held the victory. It seems that Zhou is not so good not only in martial arts but also in willpower. However, the life magnetic field of Shi can determine the distribution of life in this secret dimension. But in the southeast there is Amber, which is like a vacuum zone, completely empty. Then the guy pointed to the lake, suggesting that Zhou go there and look around. When they arrived at the place, he was surprised and smiling to find Sister Yuli. She didn't expect the guy to be so strong, and her comrades asked her to introduce them to him. They had just arrived from this teammate. Good swimmers went down to the lake to scout the way. At that very moment, one of them emerged from under the water and happily declared that they would get rich. There's a relic under the lake, so they have to make a fortune. In the secret dimensions, there are several mysterious buildings that were left by ancient civilizations. It is said that it was from them that the theoretical foundations of modern human martial arts and genetic technologies arose. The boy suddenly asked how they dared to eavesdrop, but Yuli immediately stopped him. She explained who they were, and he added that the two of them would help them explore the ruins. They simply help them so that they can distribute the spoils according to their efforts. Reluctantly, the master agreed, allowing them to join temporarily, asking them not to expect more. 10 minutes later, they reached the mysterious place, and passing through the caves, were supposed to discover ruins inside. Jan was surprised because he had asked his friend to stay here, but he was nowhere to be found. His comrades decided that he had found the treasure and left first, since he did not respond to the call. They released all the decoy bombs, but not a single monster showed up. This place seems very dangerous. Their comrade has disappeared, so the question arose whether it is worth continuing the exploration. Ian decided to continue, because if they didn't decide to take the wealth, they would remain low-level for the rest of their lives. Those who fear death should leave immediately, but those who want to get rich should stay. Walking forward a little, Zhou whispered to He that the time was not right. Yuli said that their team arrived at the lake just recently, no more than 10 minutes ago. However, Yan found this cave at the bottom of a huge lake and discovered a hidden path to the ruins. It was obviously a trick, so Zhou suggested warning his friend and leaving, but he was confident. Emerging into a vast cave, a group of people discovered the monster's core. It had lost its luster and appeared to have been consumed long ago. It's no wonder they didn't encounter a horde of water monsters during their dive. Yuli decided to ask where the relic Yang was talking about was, when suddenly the other girl sighed in fear. She discovered the emaciated body of their missing comrade, hanging in the plant's strong grip. Suddenly, Yan fell to his knees and began to ask himself where the relic had gone. At that very second, something began to sprout from his head. and he asked his comrades to run quickly. His head burst open and vines began to grow out of it at an incredible rate. Without wasting any time, he fired a beam in his direction, completely destroying the plants. He couldn't have imagined that the monster would be so smart to be able to lure them in like that. After attacking two fighters, he parasitized the brain of one of them, using it as bait to catch new prey. Suddenly, the entrance was blocked by huge stones. It was obvious that the plant did not want them to escape. Zhou knew that this was a second-tier king-class monster, a ghostly demonic vine. Representatives of the royal class cannot be classified as ordinary levels. This is not an enemy they can fight. However, he didn't care what level he was. They just wanted to watch the guy tear him to pieces. Suddenly, some force broke through the entrance to the cave, and Sen entered, declaring to Hai that he had come to kill him. The man heard that in the secret dimension of Redwood Mountain, someone was using nuclear radiation to counter the tide of monsters. Then he realized that the guy was here, and simply calculated his location by the traces of radiation. To prevent He from discovering him, he followed him all the way to the underground cave, hiding his tracks. However, the guy calmly began to ask who he was, because he suddenly burst in and started talking in some nonsense. Sen asked him to stop pretending and flew into the air to attack, but at that very moment, vines came towards him. The man assumed that the boy had lured him into the monster's lair to allow him to deal with it. This angered Sen, who was sure that this was all part of the guy's plan. The demonic vine has the ability to absorb combat energy. If he continues to fight with it, he will definitely die. He noticed how much mental anguish the man had, even though they were meeting for the first time. Yuli was visibly frightened because she felt that the cave was about to collapse from their fight. Suddenly, he asked her to get out of the way, and he used his breath to break the falling rocks. But when he did, a stream of water came down from the ceiling, so he asked his sister to leave first. Sen decided not to let anyone escape, but Zhou immediately came to the boy's defense. The man stated that he was an 8th-level warrior and it was unlikely that such a tiny hail could injure him. Meanwhile, he modified his hand, aiming his fist at Sen. He then turned to his comrade, asking him to leave, as it would be difficult for him to cope with such an opponent in his current state. He confidently asked to be left alone as he could cope faster alone. When the rest of the group got to the shore, they noticed that the demonic vine had gone completely mad and was stirring up the entire bottom of the lake. Just as Yuli decided to ask where he was, a huge creature immediately emerged from under the water. Sen was completely defeated, after which the creature disappeared, and he climbed ashore, asking Zhou to lend him some clothes. The guy explained that this was all the work of a mysterious warrior. He brought a plasma bomb and died along with the ghost vine. His friend said that the giant appeared as smoke, but the guy tried to convince him that it was smoke from an explosion, and he imagined it. Now they have been deceived, but it will be bad if they find out that he has the ability to create monster templates. He overdid it a bit, and the warrior was crushed to dust. He lost the trumpets, but he got the magical core of the demonic vine. As they said goodbye to Yuli's group, he declared to his comrade that it was time for some happy monster slaying. 3 days later, the two boys once again reached the entrance to the secret dimension of the Redwood Mountain. When they entered, they stood in shock, unable to believe how much the place had changed. In just a few days, this place has become a small town, and there are even transport planes here. He hurried to hand over everything he had managed to collect from the monsters and placed a huge bag on the table in front of the girl. He had too much going on, and if he didn't hurry, they would have a hard time finishing the assessment before noon. She asked him not to doubt, because they were professionals. This calmed the guy down a little. Then he put on the ring given to him by Zhou and began to take out bag after bag from his warehouse. The worker couldn't believe her eyes, thinking that the guy was there to transport goods. He said that they would have to hurry and count it all, because he still had a lot of elixirs waiting for him. The assessment center couldn't believe how valuable he was able to obtain. Among them were important materials for making medicines and even low-quality materials in terms of 30 million. Now the green and white cores have no effect on him, so he can exchange them for money. During the hunt, the boy collected 5 blue cores from 3rd-level monsters, as well as a green core with golden patterns. He had dealt with the monster cores, and now it was time to find a buyer to sell the identified spiritual medicine. Suddenly, a car stopped in front of him, and the pharmacy director got out, having heard that the guy had purchased a large quantity of medications. He wonders if he would mind selling them to him, since he is willing to buy them at a price significantly higher than the market price. He was unhappy that personal information was not at all confidential, although the deal sounded interesting. After they resolved this issue, the man left, asking them not to forget to contact him if the boy had any more medication. Money was immediately deposited into his account, but it was nothing compared to the fact that he increased his strength by 10%. Well, the guy doesn't even have the qualifications to buy blood jade fruits or enhanced genetic potions. Suddenly, his eyes widened as he realized that there was another way, namely martial arts. At the entrance exam, he was able to defeat everyone by relying on Dimmel's powerful abilities. But in the field of martial arts, he cannot compare with them, so now he needs to free himself from these overbearing martial arts. He reached his school and met with the principal, who welcomed him with open arms. He scores top marks in his entrance exams and is an example for all students in this school. The guy decided to give him some medicinal wine, which immediately earned the man's attention. But the thing was, he wanted to learn powerful martial arts. The director was surprised, because he would be accepted into Wadu anyway, but the guy said that he wanted to become stronger. He can help introduce him to someone so that he can develop his abilities. The next day, the director called him and said that he had arranged a meeting for him. The boy couldn't believe that the Kai family was willing to reveal their family secrets to him. Sometime later, a guy and a girl were riding a motorcycle along the road at quite a high speed. Suddenly, he rushed past them, asking him not to get distracted as he needed to be more careful. Not only did the guy scare him, but he also shocked him by the fact that he himself was riding a broken bicycle at the same speed. The man sped up even more, thereby overtaking him, declaring that he was not worthy of being on par with him, but he decided to use his skills. He instantly rushed forward, while the boy and girl compared his bike to an airplane. A few minutes later, the guy arrived at a huge mansion, appreciating its beauty. He then used the magnetic field of life, detecting several powerful beings within his line of sight, one of which was Tsai. As it turned out, her mother asked her to come out and greet him, after which she invited him inside. Upon entering the room, the girl told her mother that they had a guest. A second later, Qin began to descend the stairs, greeting he in an authoritative tone. Seeing the beauty of this woman, the guy immediately blushed, understanding why the Prime Minister was delighted with her. The girl wanted to say something, but her mother stopped her because she was watching the live broadcast of the battle between her and he. The guy's strength is such that even if he passes the college entrance exams, he will still remain a dark horse. She doesn't need to blame herself, because her younger brother has limited talent and cannot inherit the family business. In her generation, she is the only one who can take responsibility for their family. Besides, she is a girl, and such a beautiful one at that. Since her father passed away early, their family has no master who would support them. If a big family wants to marry her, they have no right to refuse, so she wants to bring her daughter together with he. Very good. With outstanding talent, simple family background, and a bright future. When they met, the guy bowed low to her, presenting a small gift. The woman heard from the school principal that he wanted to learn advanced martial arts. Her daughter will take him to the martial arts pavilion, since this knowledge is forbidden to be taken outside, and he has one day to get acquainted with it. Deep in the pavilion, 3 types of martial arts are kept, and whether he can learn them depends on his abilities. He thanked her and her entire family for the opportunity. Qin was surprised that he thanked the entire family personally, thinking that he wanted to make a promise to their family. The more she looked at him, the more she liked him, and he noticed that she was looking at him in a strange way. After a short conversation, Tsai led the guy into the pavilion, but never looked him in the eye. He decided to ask about it directly, which made the girl shudder. However, he decided to tease her even more and came closer, bringing his face closer to her cheek. Tsai immediately blushed, fearfully asking why he came so close to her, to which she only heard laughter in response. After a couple of minutes, they stopped at a stone door that could dispel the power of master-level attacks. The guy asked permission to hit her, which surprised the girl, because he should have been delighted with the properties of the stone. She noticed the boy using his blue, glowing punching technique, which brought back horrible memories. When his fist hit the gate, nothing happened, which visibly upset him. The moment he touched the stone wall, more than 90% of his strength was absorbed. Upon entering, the girl explained that her art here is divided into body movement, defense, horizontal training, sword fighting, etc. In the small stone room in the deepest part, he also needs to swipe the card to enter, but he will not be able to understand martial arts in one day and will only be able to learn a little. If he wants to learn, he needs to learn the most powerful art. And if he doesn't have the courage, it's easier to go home. The secret room where martial arts are kept is logically more secure. This black power stone is extremely rare. to collect stones to build this wall of black power. They had been collecting them since the generation of her great-grandfather. The way to learn martial arts is not to watch, but to feel the verse left by the creator in martial arts. If he does not feel this or the characteristics contradict the verse, he cannot start practicing martial arts. The devil incarnate suited him perfectly because Hai is the chosen one of this martial art, sent by heaven. Having opened the huge safe, the guy was shocked to notice that the martial art of this family was a statue. The boy sat next to the statue for a while, not fully understanding what he needed to do. This is what is called the feeling of military verse. He entered the world of this military rhyme. Sai had told him earlier that not only statues but also paintings could be the bearers of martial rhymes. This was one of the mysterious arts. Only martial artists can capture the warrior rhyme and attach it to objects to pass on to the robes of future generations. The choice was his, but she didn't tell him how to extract any information from the object. He needed to feel the rhyme of war, and if he was destined to feel it, he would feel it. If everything was predetermined by fate, then he can afford to take a little nap. Watching him from the observation room, Tsai was irritated by He's behavior. The guy now has no combat chi or even nuclear reaction, and he couldn't activate anything. Suddenly, a voice coming from above declared that only a real man could explore his martial arts. He asked the boy to prove that he was a real Iron Man. He couldn't believe it, because the real person in front of him looked exactly like a statue. When the storm comes, hundreds of ghosts will roam at night, and he will guard this ruined temple for him. If he succeeds, he will be given the power to guard the house. But if not, he will go mad because the ghosts will eat him. When the man gave the signal, a crowd of ghosts appeared in front of the guy, wanting to destroy him. He used the sword to kill the spirits one by one. As expected, the tests did not allow the warrior to fight against hundreds of ghosts without weapons. The hundreds of ghosts in this test are the evil spirits of the statue's owner, and the guy is actually bringing death upon himself. It seems that this time the person who came to court is another fool. Martial spirit masters are getting worse with each generation. Each time he has to take away their bodies himself, because almost no one has managed to deal with all the ghosts. One of the spirits wanted to sneak up on the guy from behind, but he dodged it without any problems. It seems that in the spiritual world, the system automatically protects him and makes him invulnerable to attacks. This means that he has an invincible golden body inside him, which will help him overcome the challenge with ease. The man couldn't believe that this boy hadn't actually been affected by the battle verse. Seeing the statue's angry gaze, the boy explained that he was simply studying hard and practicing steadily. Since he can subdue hundreds of ghosts, the man kept his promise and passed on this inheritance to him. However, it was up to the guy whether he could accept it, after which the statue collapsed and a well formed underneath it. This well contains the essence of the golden spirit that the man has concentrated throughout his life. The master found it hard to believe because it was the first time he had seen a person with such a unique personality. When he was at the peak of his powers, he was a hero who passed through a secret S-rank dimension. He lived to use the devil incarnate and died to use it, but as he grew old, his chi and blood began to deteriorate. When he died, he mixed his soul, imbued with the spirit of vengeance, with warlike rhymes and threw them into the statue. Although the evil spirits have dispersed in this world of martial poems, it is still not something a simple master can bear. Meanwhile, Tsai was joined in the observation room by her mother. The girl didn't understand what was happening when she found He lying on the floor, writhing in pain. When He fell asleep, he had the most contented smile on his face. But now he suddenly twitched, and his whole body was bleeding. This is the third martial art that her grandfather acquired by accident in the last years of his life. He had tried to practice this before, but he didn't expect that even with his level of skill, he would receive internal injuries. The woman was sure that if he decided to embrace the powers of this martial art, he would not last long. Then she suddenly noticed in shock that studying this martial art was not as exciting as she had described. The statue remarked that this boy was the most talented person he had ever seen, and that perhaps he could learn the truth about the secret worlds. However, the elder was wrong and the boy simply cheated during the trial. Flesh and blood was able to contain the demon. His body was similar to Shura, although his stats did not increase at all. At that very moment, two girls came to him, and he told them that he had successfully learned martial arts. Chin didn't understand how this was possible. Even if he was talented, her family would have to spend a week in the space of battle rhymes. Others called Tsai a genius, but the real genius was right in front of her. He decided that they didn't believe him, so he decided to demonstrate. It's an evil spirit he got from the world of battle rhymes, which are similar to the enchantments in the game that can be added to his battle energy. Sai thought she heard a howl, like the howl of a ghost. Perhaps it was the same evil spirit that he spoke of. At the same time, Chin looked at him with a loving and concerned look. The guy noticed that her daughter was still with them and asked her to be a little more restrained because he did not want to be called the prime minister. Since he had already mastered one martial art, he was offered to learn the other too. He still had a whole day to study. The woman decided that her daughter was really stupid because she herself said that she did not want to be with he, but offered him all their family property. However, there was no need for this. One book on martial arts was enough for him to absorb the information. Chin heard that he arrived by bicycle, so she offered him the use of their car to get home safely. However, he decided that the motorcycle he met on the way here was quite good. The woman was surprised that he liked riding a motorcycle, so she decided to give him the best motorcycle from her troubled son's collection. Meanwhile, the same guy heard that his mother had invited her son-in-law over, and he decided to see who he was. That guy who was just riding the shared bike was really annoying because he scared his new girlfriend. But as soon as he noticed the guy riding past on his motorcycle, he recognized that same cyclist. Later in the evening, at his home, he prepared dinner and monster cores. Last time they weren't very tasty, but this time he'll add some sauce to enhance the flavor. First of all, he decided to eat the blue core, the attributes of his panel, and it was even possible to add something. He had previously used a super giant humanoid template, but compared to the mysterious creatures, it was still too small. It needed to be bigger, so he decided to add all the points to the giant template. He decided to sacrifice the golden core of a second-level monster, which caused a special mutation to occur within it. Mutation means it will become a monster template with different attributes, but this can be either beneficial or detrimental. However, the guy decided not to think about it, focusing on turning the shared bicycle into a motorcycle. The system congratulated him as the S-rank nuclear template had been opened. When the template reaches 100%, there is a 2% chance that it will turn into the Dimala star universe. The name alone sounds very powerful, but it requires the current template to reach 100%. At that very moment, he saw a bright light outside the window, deciding that some kind of terrorist attack had occurred. Meanwhile, the military blocked all exits from the park, preventing the violators from escaping. The original owner of the body was a recluse, and friends did not come to visit him, nor did he order food or packages delivered. He turned to the girl sitting on his windowsill, who only smirked. Initially, she wanted to hide something here, and therefore changed his memory. Well, since the younger brother recognized her, she was forced to make him suffer. He asked her to forget about it. He still had a lot of savings. He couldn't. He would buy another house. At that very second, he pointed his finger at her, declaring that she was already dead. Meanwhile, the military discovered the enemy who was weakened and wanted to detain him. His comrade was supposed to take the golden gene from here, and he himself would be exposed to attack. Giving his life for them all was worth it. So he used the forbidden blood ignition technique. Suddenly, a girl landed next to him, and he was surprised that her suit was black as coal, although it had previously been white. Without wasting any time, she announced that she had hidden the item and that it was time for them to retreat, after which they released a smokescreen. When they broke away from the military, he discovered that the girl's nanosuit had already recovered from the impact. However, the beautiful lady still did not explain to him why she broke into his house. They should have realized that the problem was very serious. She wanted to choose a random neighbor, but in the end she chose him, the big boss. They didn't understand how the guy was able to find them, but he could sense nuclear radiation on the girl's body. But now was the perfect time to test the powers of the flesh-bound demon's technique. He hit the guy with all his might, piercing his body right through. The girl was shocked by the guy's martial arts and decided to ask which master he studied with. However, she had never heard of Emperor Guangla and would never have thought that this small city would be full of hidden masters. Suddenly, the defeated boy transformed his body, declaring that he was a 6th-level martial artist. Then he began to quickly advance towards but he did not retreat, but on the contrary, smiled. Meanwhile, a girl was sneaking up on him from behind since her suit had a stealth effect. He didn't even turn to face her, but simply twisted his hand and fired a beam at her, asking her not to interfere. This angered her friend, and he realized that he would have to deal with it himself. As their fists clashed, he noticed that his opponent's defensive power had increased significantly. As it turns out, this guy's appearance can easily withstand even tank fire. Not only did his defense increase, but his attack power also increased. But this didn't bother Hai much. It didn't matter to the man how talented he was, because he still couldn't compare to the power of the iron-crowned rhinoceros. But at that very second, he noticed that the guy had disappeared somewhere when a cloud of dust formed in front of him. Then he turned around and looked up to find an incredibly huge monster standing in front of him. The man decided that a demonic beast was standing in front of him, not understanding where it could have come from. The girl watched in shock as his comrade was easily beaten and trampled into the ground. She felt like an idiot when she realized what kind of monster she had provoked. The girl quickly moved to the roof, after which she jumped forward to reach the monster's head. She wrapped his head with a molecular thread, the strength of which was incredibly high. Even if he has become a giant thanks to his technique, he still has human weaknesses. So, without a drop of doubt, the girl began to pull the thread, cutting off the monster's head. First, a girl fell to the ground, and then a huge head landed next to her. She sighed with relief and thought she had done it. But suddenly the head came to life and opened its mouth, accumulating energy inside. After Hai released a huge beam of energy, his body returned to its original form. He then walked up to the guy with the strong armor, which had also returned to its original form and was now bleeding. The guy thought it would be fair that those who kill should be willing to be killed. However, the guy was ready to die at any moment, but decided to take the enemy with him. But before that, he said that the girl hid the golden gene in his room. Now he belongs to he, and he will be hunted because of him. Hearing the crazy laughter, the guy couldn't take it anymore and finished off his exhausted opponent with a kick to the face. The police would be arriving soon, so he needed to deal with the body quickly. Perhaps things had gone too far this time. A little later, while at home, he asked his aunt how the police interrogation had gone. Chin said that things had not been very calm lately, so she asked the guy to keep quiet. It's a good thing he warned his aunt in advance, otherwise the police definitely wouldn't have let him pass with his nuclear explosion. He also discovered in his room the golden gene that the two had spoken about. He had seen this symbol before. It was in the Prometheus file that the man from Huadu had given him. It looks like these two stole the thing from the laser bird and were chased while escaping. He decided that it was time to move, and that tonight he would spend the night at a hotel and decide everything there. Meanwhile, in the B-class secret dimension, the warriors discussed their loot. Suddenly the girl shuddered and called the captain, telling him that something was wrong. A huge crowd of monsters was advancing towards them. And on top of that, a huge 5th-level beast was walking towards them. The warriors immediately began to run away in panic, because they understood that even together they would not be able to cope with them. The monster simply watched them for a while, when suddenly it let out a loud roar. The sound wave was enough to lift the air, and huge boulders began to fall directly on people. One of them grabbed the radio and tried to request urgent support. But when they answered him, the boy could no longer speak as he was crushed by a huge boulder. Meanwhile, the monster gave the command to his brothers to move forward towards the portal. At the same time, people on the ground heard news that a huge beast was heading towards the city. They had only 20 minutes to evacuate, but the government also asked everyone to remain calm. At present, trains are intended only for children and students. Children are the future of the city, and if the city falls, they must survive. Meanwhile, the mayor's office was also in turmoil, as no one expected such a disaster. Even cities that are not subject to beast invasions are building defenses, and no one will come to their aid. Juan decided to find out about Huadu and whether they could send at least one grandmaster. However, the city next to it was experiencing an outbreak of an S-class disease, so everyone was sent there. They had no time to waste. The battle for the city had begun long ago, and they could only rely on themselves. Meanwhile, he was training with his friend, practicing hand-to-hand combat. They exchanged blows but did not cause any serious injuries to each other. The guy learned the new technique in just a month, which made his friend noticeably surprised. Suddenly they heard a rumble, realizing that something had happened in the city. Then the guy took out his phone, where all the news was reporting about the impending disaster. All the people evacuated. But he was forced to stay behind. With his skills, he should definitely fight. However, he was already charged and ready, and a mad smile appeared on his face. Meanwhile, Tsai told her mother that she wanted to join the protection group, but her mother was against it. The woman tried to explain that only a Grand Master could stop a sovereign-class beast. She also added that the girl's life does not belong to her alone. It belongs to this family. Tsai then concluded that a warrior family that couldn't fight monsters didn't deserve to survive. When the girl left, Chin informed her subordinate that they would be leaving the city. The woman asked what about he after hearing the order to send him a message. After some time, thousands of warriors gathered at the rift, even old men, who agreed to fight. One of them was 60 years old and was supposed to evacuate with his granddaughter, but he decided to join the fight. When they saw the monsters, they were the first to rush forward to prevent them from breaking through the defense. Meanwhile, the military stood at the last line of defense and waited for the signal. The mayor noted that 60% of the warriors had entered the secret dimension to suppress the enemy attack. After some time, Juan noticed in front of him a man who had returned from the battlefield and was bleeding. During the battle, he lost his arm, but was able to reach the mayor, handing him a flash drive that contained all the data on the battles of the vanguard units. The man decided to ask where everyone else was, but he was told that they were all dead. As it turned out, even the best among them were crushed, and nothing remained, not even their bodies. The black monkeys set them up. If they had thought about it, several thousand of them would have been able to get out alive. At that very second, a huge boulder appeared from the portal and headed towards the building, destroying it. The fragments of the house immediately fell to the ground where anti-tank mines lay, which went off. It was an attack from a secret dimension, and all they could do was fight off the monsters. Juan was surprised that they didn't send the beast and provoke them to attack by using tactics like humans. Suddenly, a second wave of stones poured out of the portal and began to destroy the city. The army tried its best to stop the shells from reaching their target. But along with the boulders, several monsters appeared from the portal that ordinary people couldn't handle. The beheading of the first soldier was a signal for the rest of the monsters to move forward and destroy everything in their path. The stone spikes tore through them like artillery, and they destroyed their defensive line. Meanwhile, the monster was sure that people would not be able to hold out for too long. His monsters will destroy everything until there is not a single stone left on the earth. At this time, he had already reached the designated place, not knowing what the city would become after today. The guy grew up in this town and won't let a bunch of monsters ruin the good life he fought for. He immediately transformed his body and jumped off the roof, heading towards the hottest spot. Meanwhile, the rest of the soldiers fought desperately and tried not to lose heart along with their comrades. The girl noticed that one of the guys was praising himself after a couple of murders and seriously calling himself #1 in the city. Then Joe, who had single-handedly dealt with the third-level beast, approached them. He noticed that their parents were also fighting, so they, like children, could not afford to run away. Suddenly, one of the warriors pointed behind the guy, and turning around, he noticed a huge machine that was flying straight at him. Zhou reacted instantly and drew his sword, cutting the car in half. At that very second, the girl noticed a Lord-class beast heading in their direction. One of her comrades asked her to calm down, because this was not a Lord class, and its size and aura were not that great. However, this did not save them from the problem, as the monster swung its huge hand at them. But suddenly, some powerful energy hit him in the chest, throwing him back. People noticed he standing there with a smile on his face, declaring that it was time for dental work. The monster was stunned when the guy opened its mouth without any problems, looking inside. He then used his breath to fire a beam of energy straight into the massive beast. The people watching him at first thought that two monsters were fighting each other, but Zhou reassured them that it was a human fighting him. He confirmed this, concluding that the city would simply have to get through it. Noticing his comrade, he decided to leave this area to him, and he himself would go help others. The boy flew into the air to take in a larger area and see who needed help the most. Using his skill, he discovered how the special forces were unable to cope with the huge mammoth. They despaired, realizing that weapons were useless, and now all they could do was engage in close combat. However, the monster did not leave them a single chance, and on top of everything else, flying monsters appeared. They could not afford to retreat because they were soldiers, and their deaths would help buy time for the evacuation of the civilian population. Suddenly, the special forces noticed some spirits around them, deciding that a martial arts master had arrived to visit them. He quickly dealt with the small monsters and pierced the skull of a huge mammoth with a beam of nuclear energy. He then flew straight to the ground to personally deal with the remaining monsters. On the other side of the front, the warriors were surprised to notice that the monsters had decided to move to another location. He was informed that it was he who had provoked them, and that the animals were heading towards him from all sides. The man concluded that they could not let him fight alone, as he was still a child, but also the city's last hope. Then he ran forward, ordering them to catch up with as many monsters as possible to protect their top scorer. All the warriors immediately entered into a fierce battle, trying to kill as many monsters as possible. They had to help he with all their strength, confident that humanity would prevail. One of the huge monsters took a running start to attack the city with its horns, but immediately encountered a wall created by Wan on its way. The man was confident that this would be able to stop the beast. They needed to destroy the subversive force to put an end to their influx. Suddenly, one of the monsters headed up the wall to get to the city mayor. However, the man was prepared for this and used the skill to destroy the enemy when he got too close. Turning his head, Wan noticed with horror a monster of incredible size. It was the size of a mountain and no less than a 4th-level lord class. If the sovereign mountain enters the field, the monkey must become nervous. The man had no choice but to use his most powerful skill, gathering the city's energy. A huge sphere appeared above the buildings, sucking in everything it could reach like a black hole. Wan knew that the monster was using aerial attacks and decided to use this to his advantage. The monster successfully fell for the provocation, which allowed the man to release a huge flow of energy in its direction. But when the attack was over, the monster received only a small scratch and howled in pain. At this time, huge spikes began to grow from under the ground, preventing the monster from moving forward. Wan was lucky that he managed to create these mountains, because things would have been bad if he had not done it in time. If the monster had completely entered the city, the mayor would hardly have been able to weaken it. However, now everything was different, and he could use his skills to their full potential, enveloping the monster's body. At that very second, huge stone spikes began to appear on his body. The mayor was not surprised by this development, as he knew that this beast was of too high a level. Suddenly, he felt a monster behind him, which ambushed him and grabbed the man by the head. To his surprise, the monkey asked what he was doing with his mount. Wan didn't expect that this blood-red monkey was hiding inside the stone spike. The beast then trampled the man into the ground to prove to humanity how helpless they were against him. Looking at his smoking paw, the monkey noticed that the explosion was quite bright. The monster was sure that there were no martial arts masters left in the city and could now kill anyone without exception. Wan was still alive and then decided to use his trump card by creating a huge snake above himself. The monkey was pleasantly surprised at how this man clung to life. On this battlefield, he no longer knew what a mortal enemy was, and it was a game designed to make humanity drown in despair. The monster enjoyed the place where the strongest people were now in despair, their faces radiating fear. Wan's attack didn't work. It was strong enough but slow, which is why the monster managed to return. Having caught up with the man, he declared that he could not stand it when lower creatures looked into his eyes. The mayor didn't have time to react, which is why he received a rather strong blow. Despite his inertia, he managed to land on his feet, although the ground in front of him had noticeably sunk. The monkey thought he was smart, but in the end he was wrong because he was just an arrogant monster. And at that very second, the man used another skill, with which he was able to bind the monster in front of him. Then the tornado began to engulf the beast, dragging it underground as if into a whirlpool. The monkey was surprised by this plan, because she was sure that Wan would not be able to keep him underground for long. He can't keep it sealed forever, and once the beast gets out, it will tear every person to shreds. However, this was not a backup plan. In fact, it is an anthem of humanity, an anthem of courage. The monster visibly tensed, trying to understand what this man was doing. Wan had long been prepared for this war, and therefore inserted a nuclear warhead implant into his heart. The monster was sure that he was bluffing, because no one in their right mind would do such a thing. But the man just smiled, explaining that he never planned to go that far. But he is the mayor of this city. At the beginning of his term, he promised all citizens that he would defend this city even at the cost of his life. And now he will be able to fulfill his promise by blowing himself up along with it and a fairly large part of the city. One of the warriors was told that the mushroom cloud looked like a tombstone. They immediately guessed what this meant and immediately burst into tears as they said goodbye, saluting their mayor. All the martial artists who helped people evacuate stopped to observe a moment of silence in memory of the mayor. At the very site of the explosion, a huge crater was formed, which was still covered in fire inside. All that was left of the huge monkey was a skeleton, but suddenly a sphere appeared on it, which brought it to life. The skeleton immediately began to grow muscles and nerve endings, bringing the monster back to life. He promised that he would kill all the people in this city and torture every person in the most cruel way. But now he must return, and as soon as he recovers, he will raze this place to the ground with his blood and chi. But just as he decided to leave, a voice behind him asked where he was going. Turning his head, he noticed the man you already remembered. He is one of the main threats of this invasion. He said that he had finally found it, but it was a bit of a shame that he was a little late. At that very second, he moved sharply from his place, attacking the rebellious enemy. However, the monkey thought he was stupid, singing instead of hiding. He stood so arrogantly in front of him. If the monster escapes, his mini nuclear bomb won't be able to catch up with him, but the guy can try to finish him off completely. At that very moment, he turned into a giant, releasing a huge amount of nuclear radiation. People watching from afar did not understand where another huge explosion came from. However, even after this explosion, the monster was still alive, although its body was noticeably weakened. He called the guy a monster, looking at the huge titan in front of him. He was an even bigger beast than him. Even most king-ranked beasts didn't have an aura like the guy's. However, he did not even dare compare himself to them, after which he pointed a huge paw at the monster. However, the monster survived even this attack and ordered that no one dare underestimate the monarch. After that, their fists collided, creating a huge shockwave, and the monkey remained a top-class beast until the very end. In Titan mode, the guy's physical condition exceeded 30 points on the entire control scale. However, he was unable to completely overcome it, and the monster somehow managed to injure his arm. The monarch couldn't believe it, because he used all his strength in the last blow, but the boy had already healed his hand. Then he realized that he could not win, and he rushed to run, screaming loudly. But no matter how far he ran, he was always by his side, causing the monster to tremble with fear. The guy said he didn't deserve to live after killing the city's dear mayor. He then released a beam of nuclear energy, completely destroying every particle of the monster's body. The monkey burrowed underground and pretended to be dead. But if he does this, it means he is afraid of being found. He has suffered unprecedented injuries, and this is the best chance to kill him. But such beasts can completely hide their presence. If he had discovered it earlier, the mayor there might have survived. But now he is seriously injured, and even if it is hidden, he still senses any trace of life. At that very second, he discovered a monkey that was trying to escape underground. He fired a beam of nuclear energy along the ground, pushing the monster out of the ground. The beast didn't have time to do much, because he already felt that the entrance to his dimension was somewhere nearby. However, this was the price for desecration, and the boy was ready to make him regret his death. But to his surprise, the monster was still standing and asked the guy not to try his luck. He was ready to burn away all the remaining energy from his magical core and drag the boy to hell. At that very second, the monkey rushed to attack in order to close the distance as much as possible. He noted with a smile that even despite his desperate attack, this was where the monster would meet its end. Suddenly, the guy felt a terrible headache, and everything around him began to spin. He realized it was a psychic attack, and returned to see hundreds of thousands of human hands on the ground. They were dragging the monkey's body on their backs and suddenly began to sprout straight from the titan's fingers. These hands fixed his body, which is why the guy couldn't move. However, such a small thing couldn't stop him, so he released nuclear energy, burning all the hands on his body. Meanwhile, the monkey had almost reached the portal to his dimension, but when he noticed the approaching titan, he immediately ordered his hands to hurry. Suddenly, hands began to drag towards him an ugly head, which was humming a song and hiding its eyes. He didn't understand what the hell it was and assumed it was another magical beast. With such terrifying powers, he too should be a master, but his true form has not yet manifested. Suddenly, the mysterious monster opened its eyes and screamed shrilly, creating a sound wave. High blocked the giant's hearing. But that eerie scream still reached his mind. He's killed so many people and now he just wants to leave, but the guy won't let him. He couldn't think of anything better to do than leave the giant's body. He then offered the monster a special dish from their hometown, a nuclear bomb, hoping that he would like it. The giant's body immediately began to emit incredible energy, which was able to frighten the screaming monster. After this, another nuclear explosion was heard, which was several times stronger than the previous one. Those who observed this initially thought that the mayor's plan had worked after all. Eventually, the black monkey was destroyed by a nuclear explosion, which stopped the flow of animals through the secret rift in the city. The city's martial artists began a purge of the beasts roaming the city. The siege lasted all day and night until all the beasts were slain. The siege was won, but the people paid a huge price for it. Almost 80% of the fighters and soldiers were killed or wounded. At this time, he was lying at the site of the previous nuclear explosion that the mayor had created. All this time he lay unconscious because he put all his energy into causing a nuclear explosion of the giant. But the place was already saturated with nuclear radiation and residual fission energy, so it was as if he recharged himself in this place. The battle was brutal. The mayor rushed into the fray, lured the monkey into the blast zone and destroyed it. Thanks to this, the guy was able to use the home field advantage in the nuclear blast zone and continuously self-destruct. Even if his infinite monster template is strong, he still can't compare to an overlord-class beast. Given enough time, he would reach the pinnacle of combat power, but this secret rebellion left no time for growth. He doesn't know when the next pattern draw will open, and whether it will be rare, so he must hurry and collect the magic cores. He also needs to understand the martial artist's extraordinary system. A month after the siege of the city, a monument to the mayor was erected in the square. 18 cities across the country were attacked by beast streams, and 12 cities fell completely. Among them, Guangshan City saw an S-class kingdom surrounded by an opaque gray fog. The National Martial Organization dispatched 30 warriors and 5 great masters to investigate. However, the strongest martial artist was detained at the border of the secret kingdom and emerged from it 8 hours later seriously wounded. If even such a person could not cope, then humanity faces an imminent threat. When the guy called Chin, she assumed he wanted to learn the 2 remaining martial arts of her family. However, he had another request. He wants to purchase high-quality magic cores, ideally blue or purple. The woman noticed how grandiose his ambitions were, and then asked what he could offer in return. There's always an exam at Huadu's freshman entrance ceremony, and he can team up with Kai to help her win first place. Chin decided that the guy was underestimating other students, because her family always achieved only average results, but never first place. But he knew that the woman had already decided to entrust the revival of her family to the guy, and he was even ready to write a receipt. This statement amused Chin, who decided to help the guy this time. The next day, a crowd of fans greeted the guy near the central hospital. They all wanted to get his autograph, give him a gift, or add him on a chat app. The guy didn't expect to be so popular, but he came here for another important reason. Entering his friend's room, he began to mock him, because his body was completely bandaged. At that very moment, he was met by another guy standing nearby, but he did not recognize him. It was Luo, his first opponent in the qualifying match, whom he had already forgotten. The guy asked not to look at him like that. Even though he was missing one leg, he did not despair. He admired Luo's courage, as he had lost his leg defending the city. At that very moment, someone called he, because he had been receiving a lot of annoying calls lately. But as soon as the guy put the phone back in his pocket, the annoying ringtone started to sound again. At first, he hung up, but when he decided to pick up, his director sternly asked him why he had blocked the man from Huadu. Taking the phone away from his ear, the guy declared that he understood everything, just to end the conversation as quickly as possible. After contacting someone from the university, he informed he that Huadu would open a month earlier and a special train would pick him up in 3 days. At that very moment, Joe also called the person from the university to report the same thing. 3 people in one department except Luo are excellent students. It seems he shouldn't lie on the bed. His place is under it. He thought that before reporting, he had one more important thing to do. Several days later, at the site of the nuclear explosion, a cloud released dust into the sky, covering kilometers of terrain with a thick layer of ash. It was there that he was recuperating until the sun's rays broke through the clouds. After the battle with the monkey, the synchronization pattern increased by 1.5%, which is extremely high. Combine this with residual nuclear radiation and the energy of atomic fission, and you can create a veritable sanctuary for growing targets. 3 days of training had increased his synchronization by another 6 points. But now he had to go. He headed towards the train, which was scheduled to depart for Huadu Station in 5 minutes. Zhu was already standing at the station with his suitcase, looking out for someone in the distance. At that very second, he noticed a flash in the cloud, and a moment later he landed next to him. When people noticed him, they immediately recognized him and began to admire his strength. He had a terrifying aura. Even a high-level master would not be able to resist him. Zhu noticed that he had become stronger again, and he was a little upset that he would have to leave his hometown. This was his first stop after the crossing, and also his starting point. A few minutes later, they were already on a train that was rushing at a very high speed. He stood up from his seat and looked around at the other passengers, while Joe asked him to be more serious. This train uses the most advanced designs and materials, capable of easily withstanding impact forces of several thousand tons. Using the sense of life, he discovered several strong people, but only 5 people could survive his hands. Suddenly, the loudspeaker announced the first level of alert, as the train was under attack. While the professors conducted their investigation, the students were forbidden from leaving their compartments and engaging in combat with the enemy. The students couldn't believe that this was possible, because who would think of attacking the Huadu train? However, he just leaned back in his chair, relaxed, having trained hard for 3 days. He wanted to take a short nap to recover, but suddenly he got to his feet, deciding to find out what was going on there. He met a man who said that the enemies had already captured the first 3 sections and could pull people into a separate space. The teachers who protected them, almost all dead or wounded, worked together to send him out of the area and warn them. However, the first among the students asked to provide them with evidence that this was not a teaching. He should have seen the dog tags of the teachers or the wounded survivors, wondering why he was the only one who made it out. The rest of the students agreed with him, letting the huge guy go first. The teacher warned the students not to go there, but they wanted to check everything out for themselves. The sense of life field was felt by the student with the lion's head, while the teacher recognized he. Tsai showed him his photo and told him to find him and tell him not to go into the forward compartments under any circumstances. The girl herself received a strong blow while defending him. These people were determined to kill. He couldn't stop them, but he promised Tsai that he would take care of he. At that very second, the guy hit him on the head, threateningly declaring that she hadn't even died yet, and he was already talking about her dying wish. However, the man said that he had promised this to her parents, and therefore stood in front of the entrance, not wanting to let the guy through. Looking at his pitiful appearance, he couldn't understand how he had even gotten to Huadu. At that very moment, Zhou drew his sword and pointed it at the teacher who was trying to save he. However, the boy heard enough, after which he punched the man in the stomach. The teacher realized that he would not be able to resist him, while the boy apologized and decided to hurry. Without wasting any time, the 2 guys ran towards the 3rd compartment. There they discovered a portal, a separate entrance to the space the teacher had mentioned. But before going there himself, the guy grabbed the nearest suitcase and threw it into the portal. There was no response, and not even a sound. Not even his life field could detect any energy inside. There were a lot of freshmen coming here now. It seemed like they had already entered, so he decided to follow. Inside, he was surprised to find a staircase that led to a light in the middle of space. He also noticed something strange, because they entered together with Zhou, but his comrade was nowhere to be seen. When he reached the exit, he found himself in the middle of a ruined city, and his aura was not working, as if the place was blocking his powers. However, the old method would work anyway, so he asked not to play ghost games with him. Creating a massive sphere of nuclear energy, he raised his hand upward, sending a powerful explosion into the sky. The students, who had taken refuge in the buildings, noticed a huge explosion, wondering who could have caused it. Tsai sat exhausted and did not try to understand why he had come after all. Watching from the roof of the building, the boy noticed that he had attracted the attention of not only his classmates, but also his enemies. A man in a pig mask came out to him, holding a huge sword on a chain. He immediately rushed at him, wanting to remove the mask to reveal his face. The blow was quite strong, but he took the nuclear strike head-on and remained unharmed. At that very moment, the man plunged his sword into his stomach, but he did not notice any discomfort. He could block the blade with just his muscles. His strength wasn't great, but the weapon was clearly strange, as if it ignored defense. Suddenly, he grabbed the pig by the head and opened its mouth wide, using his breath. A moment later, he was already holding his head, separated from his body, but his stomach was still pierced by the sword. Suddenly, he discovered a pendant in the pig's mouth, assuming that this was Huadu's test, to kill monsters for loot. This man's weapon was enhanced by the aura of a high-level master, making it incredibly powerful. Then he decided to pursue the rest of the masked men and take their pendants, when he suddenly felt an arrow approaching from behind. He used one of his techniques to catch her in mid-flight, noticing another opponent with crossbows. The guy wanted to head towards him, but the man started shooting crossbows non-stop. The projectiles were so fast and sudden that he did not have time to dodge and was pierced by several arrows. But this only brought a smile to the guy's face, because it was impossible to kill him just like that, after which he transformed into a giant. The students, watching from afar, did not understand why the building began to collapse. He wanted to see who this guy was who almost skewered him like a kebab. It was a man wearing a rabbit mask, holding a long spear in his hand. The guy wanted to kick him, but he jumped back and flew over him, trying to attack with a spear. The weapon almost reached the guy's face, but suddenly an ice wall appeared in front of him, blocking the blow. It was very close, but Joe asked to leave the rabbit with him. The man wanted to lunge, but the tip of his weapon immediately became covered in ice. The boy used his power to create an explosion at the end of the weapon, thereby throwing the enemy away. A few minutes ago, the woman who was watching the guy did not understand why it had become so quiet and whether he had died. The guy who came and dispersed the heavens was too tall. He was probably a local student who entered Wadu, but she also heard that some other students had also started hunting for masked people. Her interlocutor suggested that this guy must be one of them, but she corrected him because he was not on the list of the best. Suddenly, they noticed a huge beam that pierced the sky. The man didn't understand what this absurd beam was, but the woman didn't know what to answer him. The students who observed this realized that this style did not correspond to the methods of the masked men and was probably a beginner's technique. At this time, the guy with the lion's head defeated another guy in a horse mask. He already had several pendants to his credit, obtained in battle, so he decided to go towards the newcomer. If the masked guys organize this with the help of the 12 animals of the zodiac, then only pendants with the symbols of the pig, rabbit, rooster, tiger, and dragon remain. And the biggest problem is the dragon, which will be the strongest opponent. He's probably at boss level, and the fight with him will be a real challenge. And when they got so many pendants, the game started to approach the final round. If they can't win, they can only hope for the others. Meanwhile, after the battle, Joe asked about the pendants, and he told him everything. Now they had to hunt the rest of the masked men, but one of them who had shot the guy managed to escape. However, his arrow wounded him, and with its help he will be able to find his location. After walking some distance, they discovered traces of a recent battle. Zoe decided that they couldn't have gone far, when suddenly he felt someone very close. He pulled out his sword and directed the ice spikes in a certain direction, breaking the girl's invisibility. The guy was sure that those who hide in the shadows are always up to no good. At that very moment, the girl's friend asked her to get out of the way, using the gene technique of the flame dragon's combat body. Chen concluded that if Lucy had been found, her optical camouflage was too weak. Zhou thought they were ambushing him, but in reality they had just killed the guy in the chicken mask. They then hid here to lure out more masked people, but he didn't believe her and grabbed her by the throat. Lucy couldn't believe that even her clone was exposed, thinking that this guy had some skills. Then Chen decided it was his turn. Then he inhaled the smoke from his cigarette and puffed out his cheeks to unprecedented sizes. He then released a huge cloud of smoke towards he, who immediately decided to jump aside. Lucy told him not to think about escaping, then used her wind-cutting skills. But that wasn't all. Chen set all the smoke on fire, engulfing a large area in flames. He didn't care that the guy was strong, because in the end he turned out to be no match for him. But when the cloud of smoke cleared, he asked what they were laughing about. Chen couldn't believe that a simple clap was enough to disperse his fire cloud. Before he could say this, a guy's fist immediately flew into his face. Lucy realized that they currently didn't have any techniques that could elevate them to warrior rank. She was so focused on he that she completely forgot about Zhou, who had wrapped her legs in ice. Even after teaming up with Chen, they couldn't defeat one, let alone two. There was no point in her fighting anymore, because her chances of winning were quickly approaching zero. Having gotten out of the ice, she decided to run away, but he grabbed her tightly by the leg and pushed her face down on the ground. He wanted to finish her off once and for all, but she managed to break free and continued to run, creating clones. Then he released his spirits, which began to grab one clone after another. The guy concluded that she couldn't fight and she couldn't run, so she just had to accept her fate. Lucy had no choice but to give in and give the guy all the pendants she had obtained. She also said that to win this challenge, he must collect 12 pendants. The girl then offered to help him find the strongest students who had also collected many pendants. She was frightened by the guy's intimidating gaze, but he said that he liked her plan. Meanwhile, the other two students ran forward discussing Lucy and Chen, who could help them now. Suddenly, they stopped in front of a guy whose body was split in half. It was Chen. A few minutes ago, he was walking along this road, thinking about his defeat. Suddenly, he turned around in fear and saw a man with a sword in his hand, who was slowly walking towards him. Chen shuddered as he realized that there was a dragon in front of him right now. It wasn't difficult for this monster to deal with the guy and take the two pendants. The two boys immediately identified it as a dragon. The crushing blow was clean and decisive. Last time, the lion-headed guy took about 20 followers with him to find him. However, only 2 of them managed to survive. This was hard to believe, because initially it was supposed to be a simple test. Now they didn't know what to do, because the dragon had taken away 2 pendants. Perhaps he left the underground site because the first years fulfilled some conditions by defeating the other masked men. Then this final boss can remove his restriction and move freely. The boys realized that they needed to get to the others before the dragon and grab their pendants. The pink-haired boy changed his body and soared into the air, cutting through with his huge wings. Somewhere in the dead city, Tsai was thinking about how she was going to go to university, but she was inexplicably drawn to this eerie city. She met the teacher, but he said that he could only take 1 person out, but the girl could not leave at that moment. Looking at He's photo on her phone, Tsai decided she should tell the fool not to interfere. And she wondered if the one who had escaped had met He. It was a pity that now she did not have the strength to find him. Suddenly, she heard a noise nearby, assuming that she had been discovered. In her current state, she couldn't escape. Perhaps the other side had sensed her aura and would come after her to take the pendant. As it turned out, she was discovered by a flying guy who began to remember what he knew about her family. He knew she had a bull pendant, which was a pleasant surprise, and she was now moving towards one place. Tsai planned to lure him to the dragon's parking lot, but it was a stupid decision because he was no longer there. Then the guy asked his friend to wait while he caught someone. Having rammed his body through several floors of the parking lot, he announced to the girl that she would not be able to escape. Suddenly, he noticed the dragon and decided that this was impossible because he had to go hunting for the bearer of the pendant. Suddenly, a shudder ran through the guy's body when he realized that his target was the pendant's wearers. He has 4 of them, and he will definitely come first to the one who has the most pendants. The dragon immediately rushed to attack, but the boy did not have time to fly up without being hit. The masked man then used a special area that would attract the enemy when they made eye contact with the caster. It was impossible to escape from this place, and therefore the guy had no choice but to fight. Meanwhile, his comrade was able to deflect Hai's blow with his huge sword. The guy wondered if he was serious about using global voice chat to communicate with everyone. At this time, Zhou asked him for this because he wanted to test his strength. At that very second, the guy with the lion's head rushed into the attack, swinging a huge sword. Zhu returned successfully, but managed to hold his sword in front of him to defend himself from another attack. At that very moment, the ice dragon and the tiger clashed in a fierce battle. While he watched them with a bored expression, the lion boy felt that his comrade was asking for help. He then declared that if he had not had urgent matters to attend to, he would have broken all of Zhou's bones. But suddenly he approached him, concluding that he would not be able to leave here. 1 blow was enough to plow the guy down an entire street. He explained with a smile that his groan was so terrible that he hit him a little harder. But he doesn't call it an ambush, it just means his brain was too slow to detect his fist. The enemy loudly declared that he wanted He's life, and 3 minutes later he was already lying there, completely beaten. He took the boy's sword in his hands, feeling its comfort and light weight. However, he needed a little boost, so he enveloped the weapon in his energy. Approaching him, Zhou reported that he did not find any pendant in his spatial ring. But instead they found another pendant that was constantly flashing and seemed to be giving off some kind of signal.